Democratic Alliance is gunning for ANC Secretary-General Ace Magashule's head. The party has given the NPA what it says is incriminating evidence against him. The documents detail information about, among others, the controversial Friede Dairy Farm project. But Magashule appears unfazed by this. Speaking during an election campaign alongside former President Jacob Zuma, Magashule lambasted the DA. For more on this, I'm joined now by political analyst Sipho Siepe. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Thanks very much for your time. Just looking, at those visuals of the former president with Ace Magashule, no doubt quite a great deal of camaraderie there.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that the ANC has what you call factions. And that was much clearer during the elective conference, and the margins of victory were so razor thin, which actually shows you that the two blocks, and it's no secret about where people are aligned. So it's not unusual to see that sense of comradeship being expressed in that fashion when the two groups meet. But what is also important for the ANC right now is the unity of purpose. You saw President Ramaphosa almost modifying his statements around the so-called 9 wasted years to say actually that was a crude description. Actually, the more was achieved. But part of that is to say to the people, because we can see that there are people who are crowd pullers, so you're not going to push them away. So that
is that necessarily what you think his modification of statements, as you call it, was?
Well, there've been a number of comments. I mean, if you take the SACP, it challenged the whole notion of 9 wasted years. You take Gwede Mantashe, challenged that. You have Thabo Mbeki, who gave interviews recently, also arguing that that would be a crude generalization, that there are a number of things that were achieved. But you also have experience of people. I mean, there was one of the leading doctors on HIV/AIDS talked about the changes that occurred, that about more than 10 years ago, 25% of children who were born HIV positive. Right now, it says the number is reduced to less than 1%. The whole notion of NDP is also something that is new in the ANC, and it also should be welcomed, because some of us were critical of the ANC, thinking about only 5-year cycles. When, in fact, when you think about the country, you must think beyond your term. You must think about the long term, and the whole notion of NDP came under Jacob Zuma. You talk about nutrition for little children. You talk about the separation of basic education, where when you talked about higher education, most focus was on matric and universities. Now we can talk about the early child learning. So there have been a number of things that can be enumerated. But when you look at that, people also contrast that with the negatives that happened. So they say the picture is more complex than a one-dimensional description. So,
but that's in acknowledgement of the fact that there was, the looting and plundering of state resources was never as crude.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is why some people came up with that notion of 9 wasted years. But what people are saying is that move away from a one-dimensional description. There are things that occurred, and those can be enumerated as facts, not imaginations. In the same way that you can say there was
That's not imagination, but nuance.
Yeah, no, you could say that. But the point is that you had the picture is much more complex. So when you have people like Thabo Mbeki acknowledging the good that has happened, then you have ministers who every year were talking about the changes that we're making in the lives of the people. They can't have lied to Parliament year in, year out, because if you lie to Parliament, you can be taken, you can be challenged by your own colleagues. And you also, as a minister, there are issues of ethics, because you cannot mislead Parliament willingly so. So those statements that they had made indicate something else. It's a fact that we now even have 3 universities. It's a fact that we have the revitalization of TVET colleges. So along that picture...
You don't think, Prof, that this is typical Cyril Ramaphosa, not so much retracting or acknowledging that it was a complex situation, as you are putting it, but rather ensuring that everyone is on the same side. In other words, he's not seen to be going after or against certain members of his party. But in essence, you know, he still believes what he believes.
No, but
you don't think that's
remember, Cyril Ramaphosa never came up with 9 wasted years. It was Tito Mboweni who came up with that.
Yes,
but what Cyril,
posture, everything, he basically agreed.
Yeah, but you see, the whole notion of scapegoating, this is why other people have pointed out that the chief, where were you during that time? You were second in command, so you can't make that claim. So it is really people advising him that it's not, you don't look good. You may think you look good on some people who may have personal agendas. But for those like Mmusi Maimane, you say, but you were there for 5 years. And in the same way that people like Pani Pichan are saying that when you look at the ANC, you can't look at it as one person. It says when you talk about failures, it is organizational because you didn't have one person making those. The ANC itself did take positions where members of parliament was coming up with motion of no confidence. It was the very same ANC. So people like Pani Pichan are saying, no, Chief, you guys must accept the collective responsibility on this issue because in the same way that you were able to remove him, you chose not to remove him. In the same way that you were able to remove Thabo Mbeki, you only did that when it was convenient. So it's all about politics of expediency. But coming back to the issue of Cyril, I think his approach, yes, is to make sure that there's unity of purpose with regard to elections. What people are more interested in is what happens afterwards. Is he going to continue on the narrative that we had come to associate with Davos, where the guilt is on certain people. So, but right now, the reality is that even the people who are despised, they seem to have a following. So if you are running for office, you would like to have that. And if you read some of the media, the editorials, they want Cyril Ramaphosa to win big. So he would obviously not want to antagonize that because some of the arguments that is made is that you don't have political support, but at least have a national support behind you through the electoral vote.
That's where we're going to leave it, Prof. Thanks very much for coming through this evening. Political analyst Sipho Siepe.